Well, you've done it. After the last PopCross Community Redraw episode in which I redrew SCP-682 as a Transformer submitted by Brockwell, with tons of you suggesting it, I finally started looking into SCPs, and I very quickly got hooked. Which I'm sure none of you are surprised by. I mean, it's a collection of lore and stories based around supernatural creatures and entities, and, you know, that's not far from how I'd describe this channel. You know, just throw in a bit more pop culture and take out some of the more horrifying stuff. Anyway, finally doing an SCP video, maybe the first of many, so I thought I should start with a PopCross classic, turning some of my favorites into superheroes. Let's go. Hit like, if you want. Subscribe, if you feel like. But either way, enjoy the show. Today was the first day of my promotion to Level 2 security clearance at the Superhero Corrections and Placement Foundation. Here we work to register and keep tabs on every superpowered being around the world. If they get too violent or need to be reprimanded, we're there, and if their abilities could be better used in another territory, we see about their relocation. And, on occasion, if a hero needs to be silenced or handled, we'll be the ones to carry out the task. Getting to level 2 means I finally have access to many of our case files on most of the heroes we've registered, and as part of my day 1 initiation, I had to go through as many of the folders as possible to familiarize myself with who's out there. Here are some of the cases that stood out to me as some of the most incredible and the most dangerous. Hero Case 173 is Swift Sculpt. We've had to call him in many times to try and settle his murderous tendencies. Villains almost never escape him, but that's because, in most cases when he gets a chance, he'll slay his prey, instead of arresting them. Sculpt's main ability is super speed, near unmatched by any other being, but he can only use his power when nobody is looking directly at him. Because of this, he'll predominantly take on cases involving 3 or fewer culprits. He has gone in against more targets, but in those cases he'll attempt to make quick work of the criminals so they don't have a chance to all look at him simultaneously and consistently depower him. But even in cases where he's been caught with many people staring at him, he's still not easy to beat. Even when his speed is paused, he still has incredibly tough skin that's formed from a biological material that resembles concrete and rebar. Bullets and blades don't seem to affect him in the slightest, and sometimes he'll use this to intimidate foes, allowing them to riddle him with gunfire to show how invulnerable he is. This is all well and good, but it's our job to ensure that heroes are apprehending criminals for proper trial. Because of Sculpt's tendency to snap the necks of his victims, we've classified him as a Euclid tier hero, meaning he'll do consistent hero work, but isn't reliable when it comes to properly following hero directives. Registered heroes are allowed to be cold, but never cruel, and 173 far too often goes for the latter. Incarceration and personality rehabilitation may be required eventually, but for now we'll simply be keeping an eye on him and his exploits. The next case is a breath of fresh air for anyone charged with watching over her. Hero Case 999 is possibly the most upstanding hero in the Foundation's registry. The hero called Elate, on the surface, appears to have the abilities to transform the shape of her body as an amorphous orange blob, but there is so much more to her than just that. She has almost never had to fight a criminal for more than a moment, because as soon as she touches a target, or anyone for that matter, an elated sense of euphoria overwhelms them, and whatever was causing them to commit a crime seems to totally fade from their mind. She's then able to talk to the criminals and find out why they've turned to crime, and convince them to turn themselves in. Once she's done this, in many cases, Elle will do what she can to ensure a shortened sentence for the criminal and counsel them after they've been arrested to help make them genuinely better people. Because of the incredible positivity of her power, we've brought her in to work as a therapist with some of our worst offenders to try and help them be better heroes. She's been instrumental in our work and has even managed to get through, at least briefly, to one of our toughest cases, a quote-unquote hero who's well above my pay grade to deal with. Hero 682 is a violent vigilante that will kill criminals for even the pettiest crimes. He's gotten so bad that the Foundation has even hired other heroes to try and slay him, but none have succeeded. So far as we know, he's completely unkillable. Early in her heroing days, Elate was sent to meet him, and while he was hostile at first, she managed to get a hand on his shoulder, and from there her powers kicked in, and she was able to carry on a conversation about his past and his hopes and his desires. It was the first time anyone had seen him happy in all our time surveilling 682. In an unorthodox twist, she even started tickling him at one point, and instead of lashing out as we expected, he laughed and seemed to enjoy it. It was a baffling moment for all who witnessed it. Unfortunately, not long after their encounter, 682 went back to his vicious ways, but at least it gave us all some hope to see him temporarily turned. I've heard rumors that the origins of Elate's powers come from a particularly horrifying lineage, but her parental details have been redacted from all documents that people with security level 2 are privy to. To get that information, I may have to wait until the day I can rise through the ranks and reach security level 5. If that day ever comes, that is. The next case is actually a team of heroes, all from the same family, who all have the same genetic abilities. Hero Case 939 are a group referred to as the Endo Hound Gang. Not very heroic sounding, and unfortunately it fits their MO. This group is notorious for ruthlessly killing their targets, and if any escape their so-called justice, they have a way of hunting down their escapees. But more on that in a moment. Their core abilities are like that of a powerful hunting animal, with the caveat that every member of the group is blind. They rely on their keen, enhanced hearing and smell, along with their extra sense to detect changes in airflow to help give them a better sense of the space around them. They often work in small groups. A few members of the family will go out on nightly patrols together. The small towns they often patrol rarely get any particularly dangerous villains, but even when they do, the Endo Hounds will never stand down from a fight. As mentioned, there will be a few occasions where one or a few criminals get away from them, but this is when their secondary powers kick in. Now, you may have heard the old adage that criminals always return to the scene of the crime, but the Endo Hound Gang guarantees that this will be true for their foes. When in a fight against a criminal, the members of the family will emit an imperceptible amnestic gas, which will result in any escaped criminals completely forgetting that they even committed a crime, generally only recalling that they'd planned to do so. Thereafter, they'll be compelled to go and scope out the location of the coming heist that they'll think they still have to commit, and as soon as they do, the hounds will be there waiting to descend on their unsuspecting prey. Many members of the family have been brought in by the Foundation for psychiatric evaluation, but it's hard to determine which ones are responsible for killing criminals, as they'll always defend one another and never give up any needed information. There have been cases in which we've had to handle members of the Endo Hound Gang, and while we are subtle in our exploits, they highly suspect the Foundation of killing off some of their ranks, meaning our relationship with the family is tenuous at best. Now, this next case is one that I absolutely should not have had access to. Somehow a grave error in mismanagement had allowed a security level 5 document to get mixed in with the level 2 folders. Upon realizing what I'd found, I promptly took the folder to a higher authority, but I had already read some of the files. I assumed they'd request to wipe my mind of the file, but because of my quick action to return it, and my history of extreme loyalty, they allowed me to keep the information I'd read in my mind. Though it honestly wouldn't surprise me to wake up tomorrow with no memory of reading the file of this near-godly hero, Case 3000. I'd always assumed heroes this powerful and everlasting existed, but never had any proof until I read the papers we had on Serpentia. He's an aquatic hero who's lived for centuries, guarding the waters of the Bay of Bengal in the northeastern Indian Ocean. International waters may be a lawless stretch of the world, but Serpentia makes sure that the peace is kept and justice is served in his home. So far as we can tell, he is unkillable. We've never had reason to test weaponry against him, but from the litany of guns, blades, and even cannons that have been used against him, we can safely say that no conventional weapons hurt this hero. When he boards a vessel with targets that he deems unlawful, he won't strike out or tear through his foes, though he very likely could. Instead, he systematically hurls a black liquid that he secretes from his hands at the criminals, which causes mass confusion and terror. With his eyes glowing, he'll leer into the minds of his prey, unspeaking and yet somehow getting across the idea that they should never commit any unjust act or else fall victim to endless mental anguish. To study the exact effects of Serpentia's powers, we sent a small vessel full of our own Class D workers to his waters. Class D are death row inmates that we temporarily employ to give heroes under our watch live foes to train against, as their powers are developing. In this case, we were simply using them to gather information. Their vessel was quickly boarded by Serpentia. After all of them were splashed with the goop and sufficiently intimidated, he left. From tracking their actions over the next few weeks and doing daily interviews, we found that any time a thought crossed their minds that could lead them to cause harm to another human or creature, they would see the horrifying eyes of Serpentia in their mind, and if they didn't quickly suppress their ill intent, they'd be driven irreversibly insane. Serpentia's tactics certainly border on cruel, but he isn't outright killing anyone, and so long as his victims lead an upstanding life, they'll be fine after an encounter with him. Because of this, we leave him be, to do his work in peace. But seeing his file only got me thinking, if he's just one of the possibly hundreds of files that I don't have the authorization to read, what other impossibly powerful beings might be out there in the world? This episode was really fun to make. I mean, most of the episodes on this channel are fun to make, but this one was kinda next level because I feel like I just rediscovered Ben 10 or Pokemon or something in terms of having a whole new universe of creatures and beings that I can pull from to adapt into different art and stories. I would love to get some more SCP suggestions from people that know SCPs better than I do in the comments, like more specific creature and monster kinds of ones. Those are my favorite kinds of things to adapt. I'm not as into the ones that are as, focused around really messed up stuff or torture, things like that. Those aren't as much fun to me, and this channel is fairly PG, so I probably wouldn't adapt those ones anyway. And that's a fair warning to anyone out there who watched this and didn't know SCPs before and might be wanting to get into it. There are tons of really awesome, interesting ones, but there are also some, very R-rated kinds of ones. So, viewer discretion is advised kind of thing. Personally, I think a good place to start is a channel that I was actually using for all of the reference images in this video. They're called SCP Explained Story and Animation, and they're the channel that I've been watching the most over the last few weeks. I'll link their 4 videos on the 4 creatures that I was working with in this episode if you want to watch those and get a better understanding of what those creatures are actually like. Also, I'll link the original wiki pages for all these SCPs as well. But anyway, if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this, I've got lots of videos like this. I recently took famous cartoons and redesigned them into the Suicide Squad. I've done a story with Greek demigods if they were in a post-apocalypse. I recently did cryptids as kaiju. Tons of cool crossover stories and artwork and stuff. But anyway, everybody, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you all in the next video on Friday. Goodbye!